So, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Wednesday Wake Up for our great presentation with Pam Reisner-Smith on the auction alternative to selling real estate. Pam's been doing this for quite some time. I'll let her introduce herself and tell you the whole story. As usual, please hold your questions until the end, and then you can type them into that chat area down there. So hopefully everybody can see the screen and hear us all. I'm going to close that little bit right there and move that over there and hit the play button. And Pam, it's all yours.
Good morning again. My name's Pam Reisner-Smith. I'm a broker associate with Berkshire Hathaway, and I own Realty Auction One. We've been doing real estate auctions for almost 30 years now. I love the process, as you'll find out when we go through the program. I love it because it's more seller-oriented, where private treaty, or the traditional way of selling real estate that most of us do, is very buyer-friendly. It's a great way to get a property sold. It is the truest form, it's the purest form of true market value, which is another reason I love it. In the United States, there we go, auction has grown tremendously over the last, especially 15 years. It's a very intense, accelerated marketing process, and over $50 billion worth of real estate is sold at auction every year. A lot of people think that this is a fire sale or a quick way to get property sold. Yes, it is a quick way to sell property, but a fire sale, no, not always. We specialize in upper end properties, and it's a great way to liquidate a property that's very unique or unusual. I always tell people that not all properties should be auctioned, but some properties should only be auctioned. And we'll talk about how to determine what properties are the best for that process too. Some of the best reasons for a real estate auction is that real estate's the only thing they're not making any more of. There will never be any more land than we have right now, so it's a very valuable commodity. All of us know that a house, your real estate, is the most expensive thing you buy in your whole life. And if you can convert your real estate into liquid assets in a 30 to 60 day period, that's a good thing. And when we take a property to auction, it usually takes us about 4 weeks from the day you decide to auction your property till the day we say sold. So it is a very quick, efficient process. If there are heirs involved and they can't agree on a fair price, we love to take that property to auction because, again, it is the purest form of true market value. People will talk to us about their properties, the assessment, or what it's appraised at. We all know that an assessment is what they think it is worth for taxes, period. An appraisal is what one person who goes out and does use comps and information feels like the property is worth. But you bring all the buyers together at one time in one place, and they'll tell you exactly what that property is worth. So it is the purest form of true market value. In a divorce, we've had the courts bring us properties that they can't determine what the price is going to be. They've had several realtors bring them all different prices, and they've had it assessed, they've had it appraised. And we can get it sold quickly, divide the cash up, and have, we hope, two happy people in a very bad situation. It does expose the property to the widest array of people when you're the widest audience when you're getting ready to sell a property. You're limited as a realtor in how you can market the property unless you have very deep pockets. At an auction, I'm going to show you how we get mass target marketing. We don't waste money. We find the logical buyers, and that's who we target in our marketing process. In a slow market, especially for builders and developers and investors, financial institutions, they can use auction to reduce their carrying costs by selling it in the very shortest period of time. Builders have started subdivisions that have gone very slowly, and we can go in and do an auction of the spec home, or especially I love to go in and auction off several of the lots. And that draws a lot of attention to not only the builder but the neighborhood, and it gets activity moving very quickly. Again, the reality of an auction is it is the purest form of true market value. Expediency is one of its high points, from 4 to 6 weeks from list to sold. It takes us about 4 to 6 weeks to get all of the exposure out there. And we use not only print material, direct marketing pieces in the mail, the newspapers, publications, trade magazines, anything that is conducive to the property that we're selling is what we'll use. One of the first questions I get asked when I take a property to auction, or I talk to someone about auctioning their property, is how are you going to market? What's your marketing plan? My marketing plan is different for every property. I personalize the budget, the terms and conditions, and the marketing to the specific property that we're selling. Everything's different. We could be doing a huge property like we're getting ready to do for an NBA player. We've got this massive property we're selling, or we could be doing an investor's group of investment properties. The marketing is different and targeted and specifically designed for the property that we're selling. The efficiency, there's no negotiating, there's no contingencies. The seller sets the terms and conditions. When we sell private treaty, the buyer runs the show. The buyer tells you what he wants to pay, what he wants you to repair. It's contingent upon him getting financing. It's contingent upon the inspection. All of those things disappear in an auction. The seller sets the terms and conditions. They'll tell you when the property is going to be sold. They can tell me if they want to sell it reserve, absolute, or minimum, which we will get into in a minute. They can say, I want the buyer to pay the next installment of taxes, or they can have it prorated. All of the terms and conditions are run by the seller. So it's seller friendly, not buyer friendly. We have a non-refundable down payment. If the buyer don't, or can't close, he loses his down payment, which is a safety factor for my seller. The only way they would get their money back is if my seller cannot produce a clean, clear title. That has never happened in 30 years of me doing this, because I always pre-order title work, and it is there for the buyers to see that we have a clean title. That's one of the first things we call do your due diligence before you take. There's a lot of work that goes into getting ready for an auction. My husband is also a realtor, broker associate here. If he could only sell real estate one way, it would be traditional private treaty. If I could only sell real estate one way, I would auction everything, because it is the fairest way of getting the best money for a property. It's clear, clean, concise. The excitement always generates higher sales prices, because bidding reinforces the value and the price. If you are bidding $100,000, excuse me, I know you know what you're doing. If they think it's worth 100, it must be worth 120. And then someone says, well, if they think it's worth 120, it must be worth 130, now 140, 150, and it starts driving the price up. So the excitement and the bidding reinforces the sales price and the value. Again, seller-controlled terms. There's no negotiating. There's no contingencies. There's a buyer's premium, which keeps your buyer very motivated. A lot of sellers will say, well, what if he doesn't get financing? How do you check and see if he's qualified to buy this property. I don't care. We ask for a big enough down payment that he knows buyers are savvy enough. They're not going to lose a $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 down payment and not be qualified for the property. They know this up front. I hate surprises, and I don't have surprises in our real estate auctions. Everybody knows the plan from the beginning. Everyone that comes through an open house, everyone that's a backup bidder, everyone that's bidding, everyone that calls me on a property, we keep a log of that, and they are sent a packet of information on the property laying out the terms and the conditions, and they know exactly what is happening from day one. Out of that buyer's premium, we pay the seller back their marketing expenses and the commissions. So a seller does not pay commissions in a real estate auction. Now, that is true for my real estate auctions, not true for a lot of other real estate companies. They will charge both the buyer and the seller a commission, or they can split it. But in my terms and conditions, the way I run my business is that we collect a buyer's premium. So if you bid $100,000 and your offer is accepted, you pay $110,000. The $10,000 is used to reimburse the seller their marketing money and pay the commissions. We can have 1, 2, or 3 agents to be paid. I spend 5 to 10 times longer on a real estate auction than I do selling a traditional property. So the work I do is tremendous. We do not pay out a buyer's agent quite as much money on an auction as we do with private treaty, because there's really nothing for them to do except show the property. They show the property. They don't have to negotiate an offer. They don't have to worry about an inspection. Now, can the buyer get an inspection prior to the auction date? Yes, but the sale is not contingent on doing any repairs. It's just for their own satisfaction. I also have a lot of sellers that say, let me go ahead and have the property inspected and have the inspection on file for the buyers to see. That's a marvelous thing, because that is always a comfort factor for the buyers if they can see it's already been inspected and what they're dealing with. Can you accept offers before the auction? Absolutely. 75% of all of our auctions sell prior to the auction date, just because of our marketing program. I have a fantastic person that does a lot of the marketing for my auctions, and she does a tremendous job. I do a lot of marketing. We just get enough exposure out there that we build excitement, and somebody thinks, I don't want to get into a bid war, so they will shoot us an offer prior to. It is still contingent. I told you there's no contingencies, but if they shoot us an offer prior to the auction date, it's still contingent upon the terms and conditions. They still pay a buyer's premium. They still don't have to be pre-qualified or worry if they can't close, they lose the down payment. They still make that down payment. About 99.5% of all the properties we take to auction do sell. And I would put that record up against any other real estate auctioneer in the state of Indiana. We just do that good of a job of marketing and knowing what we're doing. Real estate auctions are popular in certain parts of the United States and not so popular in other parts. It's not that they're not popular in Indiana. And I'm the first to tell you I love Indiana. I love living here, but we're in the Midwest. We're conservative. And I have a much easier time explaining this program. I hate to say this. I have an easier time selling this program to clients, to my sellers and buyers, than I do brokers. Brokers have a very hard time understanding or wanting to be a part of this. That's our biggest obstacle. One, they're saying, well, I don't get paid as much, and you're not going to do any work. And if you've got a qualified, bona fide buyer, you've got to sale quickly. I love the process, but brokers have a hard time understanding it. Well, I don't know how you can sell a property and there's no inspection. You can have it inspected. It's the same questions with every property, and it's just because they don't do this every day, they have a hard time grasping some of these concepts and remembering them. We talked about the preset terms and conditions. I will sit down with the seller. I don't care what kind of terms and conditions he wants to sell under. I'm working for them. I'll do whatever he directs me to do. Does he want it to close 10 days after the sale, 30 days after the sale? Does he want the taxes prorated? Does he want them picked up by the buyer? Does he want to pay them for 2 years? Whatever he wants is fine with me. He chooses the auction date. He chooses the terms and conditions that the property will be sold under. Now, some of these, this is a class that I do for CE classes for auctioneers. So some of these slides I'm going to slip by because they're things that auctioneers need to know that we already know. But just to recap some of the major benefits of an auction, they're very expedient. The exposure is fantastic, and the excitement will definitely drive the price up. There's 3 options in selling at an auction: absolute, minimum bid, and reserve. Absolute means that whatever the high bid is, it's sold. And that's a chance that the seller takes, but it is the only proven method of getting the most interest, the most people, and the highest price at an auction is if we go absolute. I can guarantee you that you will make more money on your property if you go absolute than if you do either of the other two. But if you've got a high mortgage on the property and you're already a little leery of the process, that's going to be very hard for a seller to do, and I understand that. Minimum bids, I usually only use a minimum bid if I'm doing a commercial or industrial property. Minimum bid has to be, the minimum bid that the seller will take has to be stated on every marketing piece that we put out there. Everyone has to know what the minimum is. And once we hit that minimum, it resorts to an absolute. So if he tells me 500,000 is the minimum bid that's marketed on every piece of material, we start the bidding at 500. Now, can he change his mind and say, all right, I will take less? Yes. Can he change his mind at an absolute? No. The law states that once you advertise a property absolute, and once I open the bidding, it has to stay absolute. Minimum bid, he can change his mind. If the bidding is not getting where he wants it to be, he can come to me and say, go ahead and do it absolute, or I've got a reserve and see what we can get. Reserve simply means he reserves the right to accept or reject the high bid. That's just what reserve is. That doesn't mean there is a reserve on the property. When there's a reserve on it, that's a minimum bid. In auction terms, reserve means they reserve the right to accept or reject the high bid. I think we covered those good. Another question agents already asked me, what if the property's already listed? That's fine. I prefer to take a property to auction if it hasn't been listed yet, because if they don't accept the high bid, it does not affect the final sales price. If you bring me a property that's been on the market a year and the seller says, I've got a minimum, I won't take under, that's not a good candidate for an auction, because the buyers know it's been on the market. They're as savvy. They got so much information on the internet right now. They can find out how long it's been on the market, what it was listed at. They even know if offers have fallen through or not. They get all this information. But if we take it to auction first, that's a good thing. And it doesn't affect the sales price if we have to put it back on the market. I know what I started to tell you a minute ago on the 3 types of auctions. I have to have 2 registered bidders to open an auction. An auction must have 2 bidders. If we only have one bidder, I cannot open the auction, but I can talk to that bidder about writing an offer on the property, still by the terms and conditions. But you do have to have two registered bidders. I am very good about watching my bidders to make sure they're not in cohorting with each other. I had an investor bring me about 45 properties across the state a few years ago. So we were traveling the whole state doing these auctions. And these two guys kept showing up and talking to each other a lot before and during the auction. And it took me 2 auctions to discover, if you only pay this for this property, I'll pay that for that one. Don't bid. I can't let that happen. Auction law says I have the right to exclude anyone I want from the auction. I have had people removed from an auction before. There's a popular condominium neighborhood here in Indianapolis, and once you're in there, you never get out. The fee is so high a month, and you can't give them away. So for some reason, over a course of 3 or 4 years, I had a lot of those sellers bringing me properties to auction in there, and they were selling. And we had 2 or 3 people on the board that didn't like an auction going on in their neighborhood and tried to tell me, we're banning you from the neighborhood. You can't sell in here. Well, no, you're not. You can't do that. You can't tell anybody how they can or cannot sell their real estate. So they started showing up and actually heckling me at the auction and making derogatory comments to the people that were there. I had to have them removed, and I had to have them kept out of the next auctions. So I don't let things like that happen. When I'm back on track now, if the property is, already listed, you bring me a property to sell, you remain the listing agent. I just come on board as the auctioneer. You can keep that listing. You will get tired of the phone calls you get, and you will be coming to me saying, can you take this? Don't try to answer auction questions on your own. If you remain the listing agent, and that's fine, I enjoy that. Don't try to answer questions, because I am bound by auction law and real estate law. So there are things that have to happen at an auction and things that don't have to happen in a private treaty sale. So if you start explaining this process to a client or answering questions that buyers call you with and you give them the wrong answer, that holds me liable. I prefer to answer. I'm not a control freak. Mickey, my marketing person, will say, oh, yes, you are. But I'm not going to allow any of us to get in trouble. So I do become pretty protective when I take a property to auction, because I don't want any of us to get in trouble. So you can remain the agent, or you can get paid a referral fee. I have an agent in this office that brings me quite a few properties to auction. She says, take it, go with it. I'll take a referral fee. We do pay out, I told you, less to a buyer's agent because they have little to do, but I do not do that with an agent that brings me a property, because I'm grateful for their business, and they get paid usually the same as I do. An amendment can be added to the listing agreement that covers the terms and conditions of your contract. We just have the seller and the agent sign it, and the auction, when they have an auction contract with you. Make sure everything you need is added to the MLS listing sheet, like the auction date, my license number, website information, terms of the sale. All those things are important, because I can be charged by the National Auction Association, the Indiana Auctioneers Association, if they find me marketing or advertising anything without my auction license on it. That is a law, that my auction license has to be on every piece of marketing material, so even the listing sheet. There are things that have to be explained on the MLS sheet. So I will sit down with the MLS sheet and go over all the things that have to be changed on that. And I will let you know all the different websites that the property will be on. I do put an auction shingle on the property. Yours can remain there, but I don't like that. It's very confusing, because they're going to be calling you for information on the auction. And again, I don't want us in trouble. So I have my own professional auction signs that go on the property, whether it's a banner, a shingle, a sign. I have all kinds of everything to market in the yard. A flyer box is always placed on the property, even in a neighborhood where I cannot put signs up, like the condominium unit I was telling you about. I can put a flyer box because I'll mail into that community and let everybody know there's a property that's going to be sold at auction, because they may have friends and neighbors that want to live in there. I put the flyer box on a condominium. You own a foot of ground around your unit. I can put it by the porch. I can put it at the front door. There are places in the yard that I can put it that the association can't say you might have to take that down. Because people will say, I don't like those flyer boxes. All the neighbors take the flyers. Yay! We want the neighbors to take the flyers. The neighbors are your best word of mouth on selling any piece of real estate. They always have friends and neighbors that if they love the neighborhood, they can tell them about it. Let them help sell your property. So a flyer box is placed in the yard, and that generates more interest. And it's your chance for them to market for you for free. Talked about handling the questions. Working with other realtors and brokers, determining if the property is right for auction. I won't take a property to auction if I haven't gone out and looked at it and talked to the seller. I want them to understand the process. I turn away as many as I take when it comes to auctioning a property. There are some properties that are just not right for an auction. Maybe the seller's upside down and he wants more money than the property's worth. I'm not a magician. I'm an auctioneer. I'm not a magician. So I need to look at the property and talk to them and see what the circumstances are. I always play nice. You have to play nice, because realtors are my best source of business for sellers and buyers both. So you will be hard pressed to find any realtor easier to work with than me, because I love what I do. And I know that a lot of brokers don't understand the process, and they may have to go over this several times to understand it. Any of you that are listening or that are here in the class, I have a pre-printed packet that I can email you if you want to have it, just to answer questions that you may forget the answers to after the class. I will give you my email when we're done. Shoot me an email and I'll make sure that you get a copy of everything I've told you today. I need to establish a clear understanding and an educated relationship with my buyers and my sellers. That means all the people that come to the open houses. We do an open house blitz. When I take a property to auction, we'll do Saturday morning, Sunday afternoon, Monday evening, 3 days in a row. I have to drive a lot of people through. We auctioned a huge property on Carroll Road, 6,000 some square foot ranch on several acres, in-ground pool. It was an amazing property. And it took 3 of us to do every open house, because there were that many people. We have that many people show up at our open houses. So I need everyone to be educated. Every one of those people needed to understand the process if they wanted to be a buyer on the property. So everyone is well educated by the time we get to the auction date. This is never a time for surprises. You don't want to open up an auction and no one knows what's going on. So they need to understand the commissions, the marketing, the contracts, and the contacts. I always tell auctioneers, do your due. You've got to do your due diligence, because to them, a lot of them are specializing in personal property, but they want to get into auctioning real estate. And I will tell them the very best thing that you can do is to go get your real estate license. You need to understand the selling of real estate before you go out there and try to auction real estate. You got to be prepared, and they don't always know about sellers' disclosures and contracts and all those things. You've got to do your due. I always tell they're bad about this, not getting all the contracts signed. That's amazing. This income formula I give to auctioneers in another class that I do. that if you only have 100 people in your sphere of influence during 1 year, and each of these people only have 2 opportunities to recommend you, which is what I do. I'm in front of a lot of realtors at sales meetings and CE classes. That's a potential 200 extra clients a year. And if your commission's only $2,000 on each one, that's another $400,000 a year that you can make. So it's a tremendous way, referring auctions or talking to people. It's just a great way to make more money. I'm not sure why the picture got big for the screen, but that's fine. Determining if a property is a good candidate for auction. Is the seller motivated? Does he have high carrying cost? Need to liquidate quickly? The property I'm getting ready to do for Nancy is in that situation. He's running out of money. The holding costs are tremendous. He's got to liquidate quickly. Maybe a partnership has to be dissolved, whether it's a marriage partnership or a business partnership. Is it in a highly desirable area or very unique in its style or in its location? 6,000 square foot ranch was highly unique because there were people, in fact, the people that bought it were one of Nancy's clients, and now they're auctioning it again with us. He was ill. He needed a live-in caretaker and another family member, and there were bedrooms and the setup with 2 kids. It was just perfect for them. So if you have a very unique property, maybe a very historic property, it's in a unique location. I love to get a cabin in the woods. Those always are very desirable properties to sell at auction. Anything that makes it unique. We already talked about if it's already been on the market or a long period of time. We talked about do the do. This is more for auctioneers than it is for realtors because they don't understand all the things that they need to do like we do before we list a property. But I will go over these things with you too. Are there tax liens, lead-based paint, underground storage tanks, right? All those things, leases, tenants' rights, anything that needs to be gone over, we make sure of before we take a property to auction. The terms and conditions I kept talking about are the down payment versus the earnest money. It still is put in an escrow account, but it's non-refundable. We check on the title, deed, closing, possession, taxes, buyer's premium, broker participation, disclosures, disclaimers. All of that is covered on the terms and conditions that is uniquely designed for each property. Questions that every agent asks me: how do I get paid? You get paid at closing just like I do. If you bring me a property as a referral, you're going to get paid what you tell me you need to get paid. What if we get a prior offer? That's fine. We'll get it worked out. There's just buy it by the terms and conditions, and a buyer will know that. The agent representing the buyer will say, can I shoot you an offer before the auction? I explain it again to them. Yes, as long as you abide by the terms and conditions. It does give the seller a little more leeway if he says, yeah, I was going to do that, but if they want extra time to close, I'll go ahead and do that. If they notice this or that wanted to be done, it gives them a little bit of flexibility. If they get an offer prior to the auction, sometimes the seller will give and take on a few things. What if the buyer wants an inspection? That's fine. It needs to be done prior to the auction. What if the deal falls through before the closing? It happens. I had a property out in Westfield. What a unique property across from Big Hoffa's. You might be familiar with it. Unbelievable property. It just had so many unique features. And the guy that was so interested brought his whole family and his church out there. And I'm a Christian. I'm not knocking Christians at all. I was thrilled when he showed up with his family and his church. They prayed over every piece of that ground, every building. They had prayers. I mean, they were so excited. He wanted to buy it before the auction, but we had so many people interested, we waited till the day of the auction. He was the high bidder, and he wasn't going to stop bidding till he got it. Gives us $20,000 check. I'll take a check for the down payment because it's a felony if you write a check like that, and it's bad. So I've never had anything happen until this gentleman. and I use that term loosely. The check bounced. And anyone that knows my husband knows that there's a couple office managers that call him my pit bull. And when I was talking to Jerry about this, he said, "What'd the pit bull do?" I said told him to come to the office. He needed to talk to him. And short of grabbing him by the shoulder and marching him next door, it used to be Fifth Third, he took him by the arm and marched him across the yard to Fifth Third and stood in the bank with him till the guy came up with cash to cover the $20,000. And he ended up doing it. He was a drug dealer. We Googled him online. He had been in and out of jail for so many drug busts. He was even being looked for by the FBI. It was an amazing happening. But in 30 years, that's the only time a sale fell through because the buyer couldn't perform. In 30 years, I'd never had that happen. And it just happened that an agent of a broker of a manager of a Tucker office wanted the property and ended up buying it.
You kept the drug dealer's $20,000?
I gave it to the seller.
Oh, of course, yeah.
To cover it more than covered his expenses. Yeah. And I will tell you one thing that I learned, if that ever happens again, I had worked so hard on that property. I mean, physically going in and cleaning. I did. The next time that happens, I will have to deduct our commission, as well as, he gets his marketing money back, but I'd worked so long and hard and didn't get paid for that, especially for another agent to come in and buy it. How does my seller know how much the upfront money is going to be? I design a budget for him before we sign any paperwork. This is what it's going to cost for you to allow me to take this to auction. I design a budget and a marketing plan just for that property. What if the house doesn't sell at auction? I have a clause in my contract that allows me 2 weeks after the auction date, if we didn't get a bid high enough at a reserve or a minimum, that I can go back to all of the backup bidders. I've got all their information. I can go to backup bidders. I can go to the people that came to the open house. My phone goes crazy 2 days after every auction. Did that property sell? I wish I'd have bought it. We have a lot of resources that we go back to procure a buyer for that particular property. And rarely, if ever, do we not get it sold. We talked about trying to sell it before auctioning it. No, you always want to auction it first. And then if that doesn't work out, I've got my 2 weeks and I still didn't get it done, put it on the market with a price. It will not affect. Calling the auction, again, I talk to auctioneers more about this than you, but it's another question because people always say, "You going to talk real fast?" Yeah, I'm a fast talker. I can talk fast, but at a real estate auction, I have a lot of inexperienced buyers that are showing up maybe out of curiosity. It's a very intimidating process. And I cannot stand up there and chant like I would at a personal property auction. They're not going to understand where we are. I told you I hate surprises. I don't want the buyer or the rest of the people to be surprised because they can't understand where the bidding is. So we use a much slower, clear, clean, concise chant so that everyone knows where we're at in the bidding process. That the last sentence is true. The majority of our bidders will be new at this. We don't need to talk about marketing yourselves because that's more for my auctioneer classes. All things being equal, people do business with people they like. And all things being unequal, people do business with people that they like. That's why we all have to play nice in this business, whether you're an auctioneer or a broker, and we do. People are overloaded with information, but they're starved for knowledge. So I let my marketing materials and our personal persona let people know that we're knowledgeable and we know what we're doing. I've got the records to show how many auctions we've done, how we market. I can prove ourselves. I'm going to give you my email address, and anyone that wants to email me, I will be glad to shoot you this packet. You can see my last name, Reisner, OESSNER at Realty Auction One, ONE. That's, yeah, it'll be on, he'll send an email to everyone. Reasoner at realtyauction1.net. Send me any questions that you have. If you want a packet, I'll be glad to get it to you. Does anyone in the class have a question? Okay.
Down payment.
How much is the down payment there?
There is nothing standard or normal or regular in an auction. That is entirely up to the seller. I will say to the seller, are you talking about the buyer's premium? Oh, the buyer's premium, I usually use 10%. I thought you meant the down payment from the buyer. I'm sorry. When you said down payment, I'm thinking of what the buyer pays. The buyer can tell me exactly the seller can tell me how much they want down at the auction, a certain percentage or a certain number. But yes, depending on the price range of the property, the buyer's premium can fluctuate. Like this property I'm taking of the NBA players, 10% would be too much. Nobody would give us a reasonable bid plus 10%.
I have a
That is
question.
in addition to the bid. Sorry.
Yes, it's on top of the bid. It'll be your high bid plus the buyer's premium.
That's what covers.
A lot of times someone will write us an offer prior to the auction and they'll put the amount they want to buy and they'll put a note, this purchase price includes buyer's premium.
The question, they asked to repeat the question. The question was to get an explanation of the buyer's premium. And Pam just explained that the buyer's premium is in addition to the bid price.
It
and
is.
That's the thing that covers
On top of,
those costs. So,
yes.
And
And
that's,
out of that buyer's premium is how you and I get paid. The marketing money gets refunded because most real estate auctioneers make the seller pay all the marketing up front, period. They don't get it back if it sells or doesn't sell, plus they pay half of the commissions. We don't do that. I have found our way is much better.
typically, if I bring you a house to auction and I say I would like a commission on it, what would be the typical commission that
There is
I would get?
typical and auction never land in the same sentence. But I like to pay anyone that brings me a property to sell at auction 3 or 3.5%.
Okay, that's fabulous. That's
Yeah.
great. You do all the work and we still get paid
That's
pretty
right.
much a market commission.
Not for the buyer's agent. They
Right,
get
right, yes.
less because there's really,
What is the buyer's agent?
it depends on the price range of the property. They could get one, like the big one we're getting ready to do. I think we're only paying 1 or 1.5%. They could get 2, 2.5. It depends on the price of the property. I'm not going to take a $50,000, $60,000 property to auction, which I rarely do anyway, and pay out 1 or 2%. I'm not going to get any.
Again, the question on that was what's the typical buyer agent commission? And it's obviously much lower than the seller side.
Correct.
I've always had a question about these. You've
Huh?
explained the minimums and the reserve situation. If there's an absolute auction
Mhm.
and you're auctioning a house that you hope will sell for $300,000 or $500,000,
Yes.
do you start the bidding at X or you just say, anybody have an idea what they'd like to bid?
If I'm not the bidder, I can't really start the bidding. Because
Okay.
if I start the bidding, I'm bidding and I don't.
Got
I
it.
ask the bidders, tell me where you want to start. Will anyone bid 300, 400, 200,
Got
whatever
it.
it is? I can get a good feel for,
Yes. And if nobody speaks up, then you say, how about?
that's right.
Okay, right.
And I had one auction that I did for an agent in this office, and nobody. I had a stack of bidders, registrations. Nobody would open the bidding. Nobody. And I stood there begging and pleading and talking for probably 15 or 20 minutes. And I said, well, I really appreciate everyone showing up. I'm sorry that, the property isn't going to sell today, but thank you for your time. And I made my little speech and went off with the agent that referred it to the other room to talk. And this girl walked in tears. She said, I want this property. And I said, then why didn't you start bidding? She said, I'm afraid. And I said, let's sit down and write an offer. And she felt better. But she said, everyone out there was waiting for you to start the bidding. I said, I wasn't a buyer on this property. I can announce that I'm the buyer on a property. And I have bought properties at auction, but I have to declare that to everyone before it starts. But they were waiting for me to start, and they were all intimidated. It is an intimidating process. I'll be the first to admit it.
That means they just didn't know that they had to come on.
They were
were not-
afraid to. They knew that somebody had to start bidding, and they had to jump in someplace to buy it. They were just afraid. And she did come in finally and ended up buying the property.
Question: Are
Uh-huh.
you allowed to do auctions anywhere, or only in the state of Indiana?
I do. I'm licensed in the state of Indiana, but there are about 10 other states that have reciprocal license that I can do auctions in. And all I have to do is go and if I'm not sanctioned or we don't have a reciprocal agreement with the state, I can apply for a permit to do an auction as long as I abide by their auction laws.
When you say you market the property, where all do you market?
Again, it depends on the property and what trade magazines, newspapers, flyers, postcards that are would be targeted for that particular property. We're everywhere.
And the question was, where do you market the properties? So as Pam's saying, it's targeted specifically with each one differently.
Yeah, we do postcards, a lot of mailings, flyers.
Mostly within the state, or
I-
do you go out?
I do the whole. I can go if I've had properties that I've marketed across the United States because they've been that unique or that high end. And yes, we can especially when we do our websites. We Mickey can get us on any website, and that goes all over the world.
When you about the absolute and those, at what price does the absolute begin, or is that something that you determine with the seller?
You don't on
The
an
question was-
absolute.
repeat the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. The question was, with an absolute, where do we start, or do I discuss it with the seller? Absolute means it's sold absolutely at the highest bid. So it doesn't matter. I can take bids of any amount from anyone for an absolute.
Again, the audience has to start the bidding.
Yes. Because unless I'm bidding on the property, because they're the buyers. Buyers are bidders, and they start the bidding.
Could you do a reserve with an absolute?
No.
It has to be one of them.
Has to be one or the other. Now, if we're not getting to where my reserve wants to get, that he can come up to me, my seller can come up to me. She wanted to know if we can do a reserve with an absolute. If the seller comes up to me and says, I thought the bidding was going to go better than this, just sell it absolute. The bids just start going crazy. We usually have so much interest on an absolute that we can't, it takes two of us to handle the bids because my husband will take phone bids while the auction's going on, and it'll be
Great.
crazy.
Deborah Newman has a question. When an absolute auction, do you feel that bids are low and sells for low?
No, absolute is the proven method to bring the highest price because we get the most bidders, the most interest. They know it's going to be sold that day. So at an absolute, that's the proven way to get the most money for any auction.
Anybody else have any other questions? Great. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you. Again,
Pam.
let me know if there's any information
Yes.
that you need and I'll get it.
We will send out, you can say that, or you
I'll
can
let
move. Yeah, we will send out this presentation to everybody as a PDF, and of course we'll post it on the YouTube channel that you can get to. You can watch the presentation, and we'll include, of course, Pam's contact information for you newer agents or agents who've just never done this. I've never, frankly, thought about having an auction approach. You've just been given a new tool to make sure you're aware of. This could be the way for you to, in a competitive situation, if you're aware of all the ins and outs of an auction and you're being given a chance to potentially win a really unique house at whatever price that you think, now that you've seen this presentation, this might be good for auction, you can mention that, get with Pam, bring her in, and maybe win some business that you probably might not have won otherwise in a competitive situation. So, great tool. Call Pam anytime with questions. We'll send out this presentation as a PDF. It'll be up on the YouTube channel that you can get to, and you can watch it again, the webinar. So looks like no other questions. Thanks so much, everybody. We will see you next time. Take care.